Walking down the street, Nia Brooks grips a cheap sandwich, everything she has to get through the day. Her stomach aches, reminding her she hasn't eaten properly in hours. Then she sees him, a white man slumped against a brick wall, hands trembling, lips cracked, wearing a worn coat that somehow looks too expensive for the street. People pass without slowing down. One woman mutters, "Don't fall for it." Nia keeps walking, then stops. Her fingers tighten around the sandwich. If she gives this away, she goes hungry. If she doesn't, this man might not eat at all. He looks up at her, voice barely there. "Please." For a moment, everything freezes. Then Nia exhales and places the sandwich into his shaking hands. She walks away with nothing. What she doesn't know is that this one choice is about to bring something extraordinary to her door. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Before sunrise, darkness still clung to the corners of their small house as Nia Brooks blinked herself awake. The alarm on her phone hadn't even gone off yet. Her body just knew when it was time. Through the thin wall, she could hear her mother moving around, getting ready for her early morning shift at the diner. Nia pushed back the worn blanket and swung her feet onto the cold floor. The house was always chilly in the mornings. Paint peeled from the corners of her bedroom walls like curling fingers. She rubbed her eyes and reached for the sweatshirt draped over her desk chair. In the kitchen, her mother stood by the counter, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Danielle Brooks was already dressed in her waitress uniform, her hair pulled back tight. "You're up early," Danielle said, voice rough from too little sleep. "Thought I'd help with breakfast," Nia replied, moving to the cupboard. She pulled out the container of oatmeal, less than half full. Opening the refrigerator, she scanned the nearly empty shelves. A splash of milk, one yogurt, some butter. The door was cluttered with papers held by colorful magnets, mostly bills stamped with red past due notices. "I'll handle breakfast. Get your brother up," Danielle said, glancing at the clock. "I got it, Mom." Nia gently took the oatmeal from her mother's hands. "You look tired. Sit for a minute." Danielle didn't argue. That was how Nia knew her mother was exhausted beyond words. Nia filled a pot with water, more than the instructions called for. She'd learned to stretch food. When the water boiled, she added the oatmeal slowly, stirring to keep it from clumping. A little more water. Stir. The oatmeal grew thinner but would fill 3 bowls. She went to wake her brother, gently shaking his shoulder. "Isaiah, time for school." The 8-year-old groaned and pulled the blanket over his head. "Come on. Breakfast is almost ready." She tugged the blanket down to reveal his sleepy face. "I need to check your homework, too." While Isaiah dragged himself to the bathroom, Nia returned to the kitchen and poured the watery oatmeal into 3 unmatched bowls. She placed the lone yogurt beside her mother's bowl. "That's for you," she said, when Danielle looked up. "We should save it for Isaiah," her mother argued. "I already ate one yesterday at school," Nia lied smoothly. "Had an extra $1 from tutoring." Danielle's expression softened with relief, which made the lie worth it. Isaiah shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Is that oatmeal again?" "With cinnamon," Nia said, sprinkling the last bit they had over his bowl. "And look, I made a smiley face." She'd arranged 2 raisins she'd found in the pantry for eyes and curved a drizzle of their precious honey into a smile. Isaiah brightened. "Can I have the bigger bowl?" Before Danielle could object, Nia slid her own bowl toward him. "This one?" "Sure." "Nia," her mother began. "I'm not that hungry," Nia said. Another lie. While they ate, Nia checked Isaiah's homework folder, tucking his math worksheet back inside. "You did good, but remember to show your work on number 7. "I did it in my head," Isaiah mumbled through a mouthful of oatmeal. "Teacher still needs to see how you got there," Nia explained, ruffling his hair. Danielle stood, gathering her purse. "I've got to go. You two lock up behind me." "We will," Nia promised. "Your lunch is by the door." Danielle paused, noticing the brown bag Nia had prepared the night before. "Thank you, baby." She kissed them both goodbye and hurried out. After finishing breakfast, Nia helped Isaiah brush his teeth and find his missing sock. The clock pushed them forward, no time to waste. On their walk to school, they passed Mrs. Bell struggling with grocery bags up her front steps. "Morning, Mrs. Bell," Nia called. "Need help?" The elderly woman turned, relief washing over her face. "Nia Brooks, you are heaven sent." Nia handed her backpack to Isaiah. "Hold this. I'll be right back." She jogged up the steps and took the heaviest bags from Mrs. Bell's gnarled hands. The woman's apartment smelled of potpourri and coffee. "These should go in the refrigerator," Mrs. Bell directed. "My arthritis is acting up something awful today." Nia quickly put away the groceries, ignoring the impatient shifting of Isaiah outside. "You're going to be late," Mrs. Bell warned. "It's okay. We're fine." Nia smiled. "Need anything else before I go?" "No, honey. Just take this." Mrs. Bell pressed an apple into Nia's hand. "For being such a good soul." Nia tried to refuse, but Mrs. Bell insisted. Outside, she broke the apple in half and gave the bigger piece to Isaiah. After dropping off Isaiah, Nia hurried to her own middle school. The day dragged with empty stomach slowness. During lunch, she helped Keisha with science homework, even though her own English essay remained half-finished in her backpack. Walking home, Nia paused in front of the boarded-up clinic on Maple Street. The faded sign still read Community Health Center, though it had been closed for years. Through gaps in the plywood, she could see dusty waiting room chairs. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine the building alive again, herself in blue scrubs, helping people, having answers instead of questions. The daydream felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Get something for dinner. $6 in my drawer. All we have until payday." Nia pocketed the phone and continued walking, mentally calculating what $6 could buy for 3 people. Nia pushed open the heavy school doors and stepped into the afternoon sunlight. Her stomach growled loudly, protesting the meager breakfast, and skipped lunch. She pressed a hand against her middle, as if she could quiet the noise through sheer willpower. The sidewalk stretched ahead, carrying her away from the brick building where she'd spent the last 7 hours pretending she wasn't hungry. At least no one had noticed. Or if they had, they were kind enough not to mention it. Hunger wasn't exactly unusual in her neighborhood. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled $6 her mother had mentioned in the text. $6 for dinner. $6 to feed herself and Isaiah. Her mom wouldn't eat until her late shift ended. And even then, she'd probably just have whatever the diner was throwing out at closing time. "Gotta make it count," Nia murmured to herself as she walked, mentally calculating her options. The corner store sat at the intersection of Maple and 4th, its faded blue awning snapping in the breeze. Mr. Parker's Grocery had once been painted above the door, though years of sun and rain had worn away most of the letters. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Nia stepped through the door, making the little bell jingle. "Afternoon, Nia," called Mr. Parker from behind the counter. His gray hair stuck out wildly from beneath his baseball cap. "Looking for anything special today?" "Just something for dinner," she answered, offering a small smile. "Your mom working late again?" Nia nodded, already moving toward the refrigerated section where the pre-made sandwiches were kept. She checked each price tag carefully, comparing ounces and ingredients. The turkey sandwich was cheapest at $3.99, though it looked thin between the bread slices. Still, it would have to do. Next, she considered the fruit. Apples were on sale, 3 for $2, but she only needed 1. A single banana was 59 cents. Perfect. She brought her selections to the counter, counting out the exact change from her palm. "Just these, please." Mr. Parker rang up her purchases. "That'll be $4.58. Nia handed over the money, tucking the remaining change, a whole $1.42, carefully back into her pocket. Maybe tomorrow they could get something from the dollar menu at the fast food place. "Take care now," Mr. Parker called as she headed for the door. "You too," she replied automatically. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. Nia tucked the sandwich and banana into her backpack, planning exactly how she would cut the sandwich when she got home. Isaiah would get the bigger half, of course. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the figure slumped against the brick wall beside the store's entrance. A man sat there, head bowed, his clothes rumpled and stained. His white skin was unnaturally pale, almost gray, and his hands trembled where they rested on his knees. Nia slowed her steps, unsure. The man didn't look dangerous, just defeated. He wasn't shouting or waving a sign. He wasn't even looking at passers-by. As she hesitated, a middle-aged woman in a business suit strode past, giving the man a wide berth. "Probably drunk," the woman muttered to her companion. "They're always hanging around here." "Or looking for drug money," her friend agreed. "Best to ignore them." The man didn't react to their words, as if he was used to being talked about as if he weren't there. He just stared at the ground, shoulders hunched against an invisible weight. Nia started to walk past, too. She had responsibilities waiting at home, but something made her pause. The man looked genuinely ill. His breathing was shallow, his cheeks sunken. As if sensing her attention, he slowly raised his head. His eyes, when they met hers, were startlingly clear, blue and focused, despite his otherwise disheveled appearance. "Excuse me," he said, his voice hoarse but gentle. "Do you know where I might find some food around here? Maybe a shelter or a pantry?" He didn't demand or assume she would help. He just asked, as if she might have information. Nia shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The nearest food pantry was 10 blocks away, and it had already closed for the day. The soup kitchen at First Baptist only operated on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was Wednesday. "I don't think anything's open right now," she said softly. The man nodded, accepting this information without complaint. "Thank you anyway." He lowered his gaze again, resigned. Nia felt the weight of the sandwich in her backpack. Isaiah was waiting. He would be hungry too. She had carefully planned this meal, down to the last penny. But this man, his hands were shaking badly now. Not like someone wanting a drink or a fix, but like someone whose body was running on nothing. Before she could talk herself out of it, Nia unzipped her backpack and pulled out the sandwich. The cellophane wrapper crinkled in her fingers as she held it out to him. "Here," she said simply. The man looked up, confusion crossing his gaunt features. "I can't take your food. You need it more than I do." Even as she said it, her stomach growled in protest, but she kept her arm extended. For a long moment, he just stared at her outstretched hand. Then, with trembling fingers, he accepted the sandwich. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice catching. He carefully unwrapped one corner, as if savoring the moment, then took a small, deliberate bite. Nia watched as he chewed slowly, relief washing over his features. She should go. Isaiah would be waiting, but something held her in place. The man's gaze wandered to her backpack, where a small healthcare volunteer patch was pinned to the front pocket. She'd found it at a thrift store and attached it there, a small symbol of her dream. "People who feed the hurting end up healing more than bodies," he said suddenly, his voice stronger now. Nia blinked, surprised by the words. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nia," she answered. "Nia Brooks." He nodded, as if memorizing it. "Thank you, Nia Brooks. Somebody should have done that for me a long time ago." The intensity in his blue eyes made her feel both seen and slightly uncomfortable. She wasn't used to adults really looking at her. I should go, she said, adjusting her backpack strap. My brother's waiting. Of course. He held up the sandwich slightly. This means more than you know. Nia nodded, turned, and began walking away. The banana in her backpack would have to be enough for her and Isaiah now. Maybe she could find something else in their nearly empty cupboards to go with it. Behind her, she could feel the man's gaze following her down the street, watching her until she turned the corner. Something about his stare wasn't threatening. It was almost like he was making sure she got safely away, or like he was trying to remember every detail of her face. As she walked the remaining blocks home, her stomach growled again, louder this time. She pressed her hand against it, just like she had outside the school. It's okay, she whispered to herself. It was the right thing to do. And somehow, despite the hunger that would surely keep her awake tonight, Nia knew it was true. Nia dragged her feet as she approached the small house at the end of Willow Street. The paint peeled in long strips from the wooden siding, and the front steps creaked under her weight. The porch light had burned out weeks ago, and no one had found time or money to replace it yet. The darkening sky cast long shadows across the yard as the sun began to set. She paused at the door, taking a deep breath. The banana weighed heavily in her backpack now, a reminder of what was missing. What should have been dinner for two was now just a snack for one. Her stomach growled again, louder this time, as if protesting her decision. It's fine, she whispered to herself. We've gone with less before. When she pushed open the front door, Isaiah looked up from where he sat on the worn living room rug. Homework spread around him like a paper island. Nia! He jumped up, all energy and motion as only an 8-year-old could be after a full day of school. Did you get food? I'm starving. His wide brown eyes and eager smile made her chest tighten. She forced a smile as she swung her backpack down. I got you something, buddy. She unzipped the bag and pulled out the banana. It's your favorite. Isaiah took the fruit, his smile dimming slightly. Just this? He glanced toward her backpack, clearly expecting more. Sorry, that's all for now. Mom will bring something when she gets home from her first job. The lie felt heavy on her tongue. Danielle wouldn't be home for hours, and there'd be no extra money for food tonight. Oh, Isaiah peeled the banana slowly. I thought you were getting a sandwich, too. Before Nia could answer, Danielle's voice came from the kitchen doorway. I thought so, too. Nia hadn't realized her mother was home. Danielle stood with her arms crossed, still wearing her blue diner uniform, exhaustion carved into the lines around her eyes. She must have gotten a rare break between shifts. Where's the rest of the food, Nia? I gave you enough for dinner. Nia hesitated, suddenly aware of how her decision might look through her mother's eyes. Give me half, Nia, Isaiah offered, breaking the banana carefully. We can share. Eat it all, Isaiah, Nia said quickly. I'm not that hungry anyway. Danielle stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. What happened to the money I sent you with? Nia swallowed hard. I got the sandwich and the banana, but what? Danielle's voice sharpened. Where's the sandwich? The room felt too small suddenly. Isaiah looked between them, the banana forgotten in his hands. There was a man outside the store, Nia finally said. He looked really sick, Mom, like he hadn't eaten in days. Understanding dawned on Danielle's face, followed immediately by disbelief. You gave our food to a stranger? He was shaking so bad, Nia tried to explain. Nobody was helping him. And what about your brother? Danielle's voice rose. Who's helping him? Who's helping us? Isaiah took a small bite of the banana, his eyes lowered to the floor. I'm sorry, Nia said, her voice small. I thought... That's the problem, Nia. You weren't thinking. Danielle sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly looking much older than her 38 years. We are the people who need help. We're the ones one missed paycheck away from the street. The truth of her mother's words stung. Nia knew their situation better than most 14-year-olds. She'd seen the disconnect notices, heard her mother crying late at night over bills, watched her work double shifts until her feet swelled so badly she could barely walk. "I know it seems cruel," Danielle continued, her voice softening slightly. "But generosity is dangerous for people like us. We can't afford to save everyone else when we're barely saving ourselves." Nia nodded, shame heating her cheeks. "I won't do it again." Danielle rubbed her temples. "There's some peanut butter in the cupboard. That'll have to do for tonight. I've got 20 minutes before I need to head to the convenience store shift." Isaiah silently offered the remaining half of his banana to Nia. This time, she took it, knowing it would hurt his feelings more if she refused. The open window in the kitchen let in the evening breeze, carrying with it the sound of a screen door closing next door. Nia glanced out to see Ruthie Bell settling into her porch rocker, a mug of tea in her weathered hands. The older woman's eyes met Nia's through the window, and Nia knew she had heard everything. Later, after Danielle had left for her second job, and Isaiah had fallen asleep on the couch while attempting to finish his math problems, Nia sat at the kitchen table working on her science assignment. The overhead light flickered every few minutes, threatening to go out completely. A soft knock at the back door made her jump. Ruthie Bell stood on the other side of the screen, her gray hair tied back in its usual neat bun. "Evening, child," she said when Nia let her in. "Thought you might like some of my corn muffins. Made too many again." The small basket she carried contained 4 golden brown muffins, still slightly warm. Nia's mouth watered at the sight. "Thank you, Miss Ruthie," she said gratefully. "Would you like to sit for a minute?" The older woman settled at the table while Nia put the kettle on for tea. It was their ritual whenever Ruthie visited. Tea for the visitor, regardless of how little they had to offer. "I couldn't help overhearing earlier," Ruthie said gently, "about that sandwich." Nia's shoulders slumped. "Mom's right. I shouldn't have given it away." "Your mama's not wrong," Ruthie said, surprising her. "Not entirely. She's looking at the world through survival eyes, and survival doesn't leave much room for risk." The kettle whistled, and Nia poured hot water over their last tea bag, letting it steep in Ruthie's cup before adding water to her own cup to make tea-flavored water. "But I'm not wrong either," Nia said quietly. "He really needed help." Ruthie nodded, wrapping her thin fingers around the chipped mug. "Kindness makes practical people nervous. You know why? Because it can't be measured or controlled. It doesn't follow the rules of who deserves what." Nia thought about that as she took a small bite of muffin, savoring the sweet corn flavor. "He said something strange to me, that people who feed the hurting end up healing more than bodies." "Smart man," Ruthie commented. "He seemed different, sad, but also like he was really seeing me." Nia struggled to explain the feeling. "Not just looking through me like most people do." Ruthie studied her over the rim of her mug. "Trust that feeling, child. Your heart knows things your head can't explain." After Ruthie left, Nia finished her homework in the flickering light. The house felt too quiet with just Isaiah's soft breathing from the couch to keep her company. She couldn't stop thinking about the man's blue eyes, the way his hands had trembled when he took the sandwich, the strange intensity when he'd asked her name. She was just putting away her books when she heard it. A soft but distinct knock at the front door. Nia froze, textbook halfway to her backpack. It was nearly 11 o'clock. Danielle wouldn't knock. She had keys. Nobody in their neighborhood visited this late without calling first. The knock came again, slightly louder this time. Nia glanced at Isaiah, still asleep on the couch. She moved to the window, carefully pulling back the edge of the thin curtain to peer outside. The porch was dark, the streetlight too far away to illuminate whoever stood at their door. Her heart pounded as she crept toward the front of the house. Should she wake Isaiah? No. Better to let him sleep. It was probably nothing. Maybe Mrs. Wilson from down the street, locked out again and needing to use their phone. The third knock made her jump. Whoever it was, they weren't going away. Nia's hand hovered over the doorknob as her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. Don't open the door to strangers. Don't trust too easily. Be careful. Always careful. But something made her reach for the switch beside the door, flipping on the porch light that hadn't worked in weeks. To her surprise, it flickered to life. With Danielle holding her breath behind her, Nia opened the front door. The porch light cast a weak yellow glow over the cracked concrete steps, but no one stood there. The street beyond was quiet and empty. "Who is it?" Danielle whispered, her hands gripping Nia's shoulders. "Nobody," Nia answered, confused. She leaned forward slightly, peering into the darkness. "There's nobody here." But as she looked down, something caught her eye. A small white square rested on their faded welcome mat. A piece of paper, neatly folded. "What's that?" Danielle asked, her voice tight with worry. She pulled Nia back a step. "Don't touch it. It's just a note, Mom." Nia bent down and picked it up before her mother could stop her. The paper was crisp and clean, folded precisely into quarters. Danielle closed the door quickly, shooting the deadbolt into place. "Let me see that." She snatched the note from Nia's hands and unfolded it carefully, as if it might bite. 3 words were written in neat, steady handwriting. "Honor still lives here." Danielle's eyebrows pulled together. "What does that mean? Who left this?" Nia took the note back, reading the words again. "I don't know." "It must be that man," Danielle said, her voice rising. "The one you gave the sandwich to. He followed you home, Nia. This is exactly what I was worried about." "But it doesn't sound threatening," Nia argued, studying the careful handwriting. "It sounds almost like a thank you." Danielle paced the small living room, where Isaiah still slept soundly on the couch, oblivious to the late-night drama. "We don't know what it means. We don't know who this person is or what they want. Maybe we should ask Miss Ruthie," Nia suggested. "She might know what to make of it." Danielle hesitated, then nodded. "I'll go get her. You lock this door behind me, and don't open it for anyone but us. Understand?" 5 minutes later, Ruthie Bell stood in their living room, wearing a faded floral bathrobe over her nightgown, her gray hair loose around her shoulders. She held the note up to the light, turning it this way and that, as if examining a rare specimen. "No signature," she murmured. "Good quality paper, though." "Do you think it's from that man I helped?" Nia asked. Ruthie handed the note back. "Can't say for sure, child, but it does have the feel of gratitude to it. Gratitude would be a simple thank you, not some cryptic message left in the middle of the night," Danielle countered, checking the locks on the windows for the second time since Ruthie arrived. "Some folks forget how to say simple things," Ruthie said, lowering herself into the armchair by the window. "When you've been hungry long enough, or lonely enough, sometimes you forget how normal people talk. You start speaking in the language of the lost." Nia turned the note over in her hands. "What does honor still lives here mean, then?" "Means you did something honorable," Ruthie said simply. "And this person, whoever they are, noticed. That's rare enough these days to deserve mention." Danielle wasn't convinced. "I still don't like it. First, she gives away our food to a stranger, and now that stranger knows where we live? What's next?" "You want me to stay the night?" Ruthie offered. "I can sleep right here in this chair." Danielle shook her head after a moment. "No, we'll be fine. I'm probably overreacting. But Nia," she turned to her daughter, "no more helping strangers. You hear me? Not until this blows over." After Ruthie left, with promises to check on them first thing in the morning, Danielle made one more round through the house. She checked the back door, tested the window locks again, and even pushed the wobbly bookshelf in front of the side door they never used. "Try to get some sleep," she told Nia, kissing her forehead. I've got the early shift tomorrow, but I'll call to check on you at lunch." Nia nodded, but sleep felt impossible now. She took the note to her bedroom, the smallest room in the house, with barely enough space for her twin bed and a wooden crate that served as both nightstand and dresser. She slipped the note carefully between the pages of her school notebook, then sat cross-legged on her bed, thinking. The man outside the store hadn't seemed threatening. Hungry, yes. Sad, definitely. But there had been something in his eyes, intelligence, awareness, that hadn't matched his ragged appearance. And those words he'd spoken about healing more than bodies. They hadn't sounded like the ramblings of someone dangerous. Through her thin curtains, the streetlight cast long shadows across her faded quilt. Nia replayed the encounter in her mind. The man's trembling hands, the way he'd asked her name as if it mattered, how he'd looked at her with something like recognition. Why would he send a note like this? And what did he mean by honor? It felt bigger than a simple thank you, weightier somehow, like he was acknowledging something about her character, not just her actions. Her eyelids grew heavy as midnight came and went. She could hear her mother's restless movements in the next room, the floor creaking under her pacing steps. In the living room, Isaiah snored softly, blissfully unaware of the night's strange events. Honor still lives here. The words followed her into her dreams. When she woke, gray dawn light filtered through the window. For a moment, Nia thought the events of the night before might have been a dream. The knock, the empty porch, the mysterious note. But when she reached for her notebook, the folded paper was still there, the words still inexplicable in the morning light. She dressed quickly, hearing her mother already moving around the kitchen. The smell of their last coffee grounds brewing told her Danielle was worried enough to need the caffeine, even if they couldn't afford to replace the can until payday. "Did you sleep?" Danielle asked when Nia entered the kitchen. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, answering the question before Nia could ask it in return. "A little," Nia lied. "It's probably nothing bad, Mom. Maybe he was just grateful." "Maybe." Danielle didn't sound convinced. She handed Nia a mug of watery coffee, heavily lightened with the powdered creamer they used to stretch it. "Wake your brother soon. You'll need to get him to school before you head to class." Nia nodded, sipping the weak coffee and staring out the kitchen window at their small backyard. The early morning light made the patchy grass look almost pretty, hiding the worn spots and weeds. She was about to go wake Isaiah when she felt it, a vibration through the floor, a rumble that made the windows rattle slightly in their frames. At first, she thought it was the garbage truck, though it wasn't their collection day. But the rumble grew louder, multiplied, became a chorus of engines moving in unison. "What on earth?" Danielle moved to the front window, pulling back the curtain. The sound grew louder still, not one engine but many, rolling slowly into their quiet street like thunder on a clear morning. From houses up and down the block, curious faces appeared in windows. Front doors opened. Neighbors in robes and pajamas stepped onto porches, squinting into the brightening day. The coffee mug trembled in Nia's hand, spilling a few drops onto the linoleum floor. Whatever was coming, it was big enough to wake the whole neighborhood. Danielle turned to her, face pale with worry. "Stay inside," she ordered, "and keep Isaiah away from the windows." But before Nia could respond, Isaiah himself burst from the living room, sleep-tousled but wide-eyed with excitement. "Mom! Nia! Something's happening outside!" The rumble of engines grew louder, and now there were voices too. Men's voices, calm and ordered, calling out numbers and positions. The sound of many boots hitting pavement in unison. Danielle's hand went to her throat. "Nia, what did you do?" Nia stood frozen in the doorway, her hand gripping the worn wooden frame so tightly her knuckles paled. The sight before her seemed impossible, like something from a movie playing out on their humble street. A line of men in crisp naval uniforms stood at perfect attention, creating a human corridor that stretched from her cracked concrete steps all the way to the street. They were tall, powerfully built men with stern faces and ramrod-straight postures. The morning sun glinted off polished buttons and insignia pins. "Oh my God," Danielle whispered beside her, one protective arm moving instinctively around Isaiah's small shoulders. "What is happening?" Neighbors poured from their homes in various states of dress, some in work clothes, others still in pajamas and bathrobes. Mrs. Jennings, from 2 doors down, clutched her coffee mug with both hands. Mr. Washington from across the street stood on his lawn in striped pajama pants and a white undershirt, mouth hanging open. "Mama, are those soldiers?" Isaiah asked, his voice small but excited. "Navy SEALs," corrected an older boy from down the block who had rushed over on his bicycle. "Those are elite forces, the toughest guys in the military." Whispers rippled through the gathering crowd. "Someone's getting arrested. Must be a drug bust. Poor Danielle and those kids." Danielle's breathing quickened. She stepped slightly in front of Nia, as if to shield her from whatever was coming. "We haven't done anything wrong," she said, her voice stronger than she likely felt. At the front of the formation stood an older man with silver hair cut military short. He wore a different uniform than the others, more decorated, with insignia that marked him as someone of high rank. His weathered face showed lines of both authority and experience. This was clearly a man accustomed to being obeyed. He stepped forward, and the already quiet line of servicemen seemed to grow even more still, more attentive. "Is this the residence of Nia Brooks?" His voice carried easily across the yard, deep and measured. Nia felt her mother's hand tighten on her arm, but she stepped forward anyway. "Yes, sir. I'm Nia." The man's stern expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened almost imperceptibly. He approached the steps with measured strides, stopping at a respectful distance. "Miss Brooks, I am Commander Thomas Hale," he said formally, "and I want to assure you immediately that you are not in any trouble." "Quite the contrary." Danielle moved forward. "Then what is this about? Why are there military men outside my house at 7 in the morning?" Commander Hale turned his attention to her. "You must be Mrs. Brooks. I apologize for the early hour and any distress our arrival has caused. We're here at the request of someone who believes your daughter deserves public recognition." "Recognition? For what?" Danielle asked, confusion replacing some of her fear. The commander's gaze returned to Nia. "Yesterday evening, your daughter gave her only food to a man who appeared homeless outside Corner Market. That man was Elliot Grayson." He paused, as if the name should mean something. Nia nodded slowly. "Yes, I gave him my sandwich. But I don't understand." "Mr. Grayson contacted me last night," Commander Hale continued. "He asked that before any other version of events could circulate, honor should arrive at your door first." Isaiah tugged at Nia's shirt. "You gave away our sandwich to a stranger?" he whispered loudly. "I'm sorry," she whispered back, suddenly feeling guilty all over again. Commander Hale overheard. "Young man, your sister did something most adults wouldn't do. She saw someone suffering and helped without being asked. That kind of character deserves recognition." "But who is he?" Danielle pressed, still clearly suspicious. "Why would giving a sandwich to someone bring all this?" She gestured at the formation of servicemen. Commander Hale clasped his hands behind his back. "Mr. Grayson is connected to people who still believe character matters more than circumstance. He is important to many of us who served, though he never wore a uniform himself." Ruthie Bell had made her way through the gathering crowd, her bright floral house dress standing out among the neighbors. She nodded at Commander Hale with unexpected familiarity. "Thomas Hale," she said, her voice carrying a hint of surprise. Haven't seen you since your promotion ceremony." The commander's expression warmed slightly. "Mrs. Bell, it's been a long time." "You two know each other?" Danielle asked incredulously. Ruthie smiled. "My late husband served with the commander's father. Military world is smaller than you think." She turned to Hale. "This about Elliot Grayson finally coming home?" Something passed between them, a shared understanding that the rest of them weren't privy to. "Yes, ma'am," Commander Hale replied, and finding something he thought was lost. By now, the entire neighborhood was watching. Nia felt dozens of eyes on her, curious, confused, amazed. The attention made her want to retreat back into the house, but something about the commander's dignified presence kept her rooted to the spot. "I still don't understand," she said quietly. "It was just a sandwich." "To you, perhaps," Commander Hale replied. To him, it was proof that kindness still exists without cameras rolling or rewards being offered. He turned slightly, gesturing to the line of uniformed men. "These men serve because they believe in protecting something worthy. You showed Mr. Grayson that worthy things still exist in everyday places." Isaiah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "So my sister did something good? And that's why all these strong men came?" Commander Hale smiled, the first real smile they'd seen from him. "That's exactly right, young man." Danielle still looked overwhelmed, her eyes darting from the commander to the line of servicemen to the gathering neighbors. "This is a lot. For a sandwich. For character," Commander Hale corrected gently. "Which is increasingly rare and precious." Nia felt a strange mixture of emotions: embarrassment at being the center of attention, confusion about why her simple act mattered so much, and a small spark of pride that someone had noticed her when she'd spent most of her life feeling invisible. Mrs. Jennings from down the street stepped forward. "I've known this child since she was in diapers. Always helping. Always thinking of others before herself. Not surprised a bit that she'd give away her last bite." Several other neighbors nodded in agreement. Commander Hale turned back to Danielle. "Mr. Grayson would like to meet with your family properly today, to express his gratitude in person." Danielle's brow furrowed with suspicion. "Meet where? And who exactly is this man? Yesterday he looked homeless." "Not homeless," Ruthie interjected. "Lost. There's a difference." She turned to Commander Hale. "The Grayson family had that big property over in Oakwood, didn't they? Old money, going back generations." "Yes, ma'am," the commander confirmed, "though Elliot hasn't been back there in years." "Not since the accident." Ruthie nodded knowingly, while Danielle and Nia exchanged confused glances. "If you're comfortable," Commander Hale continued, addressing Danielle, "Mr. Grayson would like to meet at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I can send a car for you, or provide the address if you prefer to make your own way." Danielle hesitated, clearly torn. On one hand, this entire situation was bizarre and potentially concerning. On the other, the presence of uniformed military personnel and Ruthie's apparent familiarity with the situation lent it a strange legitimacy. "I don't know," she said finally. "This is all very sudden." Ruthie stepped closer, placing a weathered hand on Danielle's arm. "Child, when a door opens that's been closed for generations, you at least peek through it. Hear what the man has to say." Isaiah tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Please, Mom. I want to meet the man Nia helped." Commander Hale remained patient, his stance relaxed but dignified. "Mr. Grayson simply wishes to thank your daughter properly. Nothing more is expected of you or her." Danielle looked at Nia, silently asking what she wanted to do. Nia thought about the man's trembling hands as he'd accepted her sandwich, about the strange words he'd spoken about healing, about the note that had appeared on their doorstep. Something important was happening, something she didn't understand yet, but somehow felt connected to. "I think we should go," she said softly. After another moment's hesitation, Danielle nodded. "All right, we'll meet him. But we'll drive ourselves if you provide the address." "Of course," Commander Hale replied, producing a small card from his pocket. "This has the location and my personal number, should you have any questions or concerns." As Danielle accepted the card, the commander turned and made a small gesture toward the line of servicemen. As one, they shifted stance, preparing to depart. "Thank you for your time this morning," he said formally. "And thank you, Miss Brooks, for reminding us all what matters." The formation began to disperse with military precision, filing back toward the vehicles that lined the street, black SUVs with government plates. The neighbors watched in astonishment as the impressive display folded itself away as quickly and efficiently as it had appeared. Ruthie squeezed Nia's shoulder. "You go get ready, child. Sometimes the smallest kindness opens the biggest doors." The car ride was silent, except for Isaiah's occasional whispers to Nia about the leather seats. Commander Hale drove them personally in a modest sedan rather than the official vehicles from that morning. Danielle sat stiffly in the passenger seat, wearing Ruthie's blue blouse with tiny white flowers that she'd carefully ironed twice. She kept glancing back at Nia, as if to make sure she was still there. Nia smoothed her own skirt, her church clothes that didn't quite fit anymore, and watched the neighborhoods change through the window. They weren't going to the wealthy part of town as she'd expected, but toward the quieter waterfront, where small guest houses nestled between trees and glimpses of the bay flashed between buildings. "Almost there," Commander Hale said, breaking the silence as he turned onto a narrow lane. "Mr. Grayson prefers privacy these days. I still don't understand why all this fuss over a sandwich," Danielle said, though her voice had lost some of its edge from earlier. Commander Hale kept his eyes on the road. "Sometimes the smallest kindness arrives at exactly the right moment, Mrs. Brooks. Your daughter's generosity mattered more than she could have known." Isaiah pressed his face against the window. "Is he rich? The man Nia helped?" "Isaiah," Danielle scolded quietly. "It's a fair question," Commander Hale said with a slight smile. "Mr. Grayson comes from means, yes, but wealth isn't what defines him." They pulled up to a modest blue guest house with white trim. It wasn't fancy, just clean, well-kept, and tucked away from the main road with a small garden and a view of the water beyond a line of trees. "He's waiting for you inside," Commander Hale said, opening Danielle's door first. "I'll wait out here." Nia followed her mother and brother up the stone path, her heart thumping against her ribs. What would she say to this man who had caused such a commotion in their lives? The door opened before they reached it. Elliot Grayson stood in the doorway, and Nia almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the unkempt beard and dirty clothes. His face was clean-shaven, showing sharp cheekbones and tired eyes. His gray hair was neatly combed, and he wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks. He looked older than Nia had first thought, maybe in his late 50s, and fragile, like someone recovering from a long illness. "Mrs. Brooks, Nia, Isaiah," he greeted them softly, stepping aside. "Please come in." "Thank you for coming." The inside was as modest as the exterior, comfortable but not luxurious, with simple furniture and large windows that let in the afternoon light. A tray with tea, lemonade, and cookies sat on the coffee table. "Please, sit." Elliot gestured to the couch. "I imagine you have questions." Danielle perched on the edge of the couch, keeping Isaiah close beside her. "More than a few." Nia sat next to her brother, studying the man who yesterday had looked so different. His hands still trembled slightly as he poured lemonade for them. "First, I want to apologize for the shock this morning," Elliot began, settling into an armchair across from them. Commander Hale tends toward the dramatic when honor is involved. "Were you really homeless?" Isaiah blurted out, before Danielle could stop him. A sad smile crossed Elliot's face. Not technically, no. But I was certainly lost. He looked directly at Naya. I've been wandering for weeks, barely eating, barely sleeping. After my father passed recently, something in me broke. I couldn't face the responsibility he left behind. So you were pretending? Danielle asked, her suspicion returning. No. Elliot shook his head firmly. I wasn't pretending anything. I was disappearing. There's a difference. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. My father was a decorated military advisor. The men who came to your door this morning, many of them owe their careers, some even their lives, to his mentorship. And you? Nia asked quietly. Were you in the military too? No, Elliot replied. I worked adjacent to military operations, intelligence, humanitarian coordination. Until 3 years ago, when I lost my wife and daughter in an accident overseas. His voice grew strained. After that, I withdrew from everything. When my father died last month, it felt like the last thread connecting me to any purpose was gone. The room fell silent. Nia thought about how different he looked from yesterday. Not just clean, but somehow present in a way he hadn't been before. I'm sorry for your losses, Danielle said finally, her voice softer. Elliot nodded in acknowledgement. The day you saw me, Naya, I had been walking for hours without eating. I was surrendering, I suppose, giving up. Every person who passed me looked through me like I was already gone. He leaned forward slightly. But you saw me. You didn't just give me food. You gave me dignity. You called me sir. You looked me in the eyes. And somehow, that simple human connection was enough to wake me up. Isaiah reached for a cookie, but Danielle gently moved his hand back. Please, Elliot gestured to the tray. That's what it's there for. As Isaiah happily took a cookie, Elliot continued. I called Commander Hale that night because I wanted him to make sure someone acknowledged what you did. In my family, we believe recognition should meet character, especially when character appears in unexpected places. The note, Nia said suddenly. On our porch. That was from you? Elliot nodded. I wasn't ready to face you yet, but I wanted you to know that someone saw what you did. Honor still lives here, Danielle repeated the words from the note. What does that mean? It means, Elliot said carefully, that in a world where most people walk past suffering, your daughter stopped. That kind of honor is rarer than it should be. Danielle studied him for a long moment, her expression softening as she seemed to accept his sincerity. She's always been that way, even when we have nothing to spare. Especially then, Elliot agreed. Nia felt her cheeks warm at their discussion. I just did what anyone would do. But they don't, Elliot said simply. That's the point. People don't. I've spent weeks watching them walk by. The conversation paused as they sipped their drinks. Isaiah had migrated to looking at a collection of small wooden boats displayed on a shelf near the window. Those were my father's, Elliot explained, noticing Isaiah's interest. He built model ships his whole life. They're cool, Isaiah said, carefully touching the edge of one. Elliot smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. You can hold that one if you'd like. As Isaiah carefully picked up the small boat, Elliot turned back to Nia and Danielle. I know this all seems strange. A stranger appears, then Navy SEALs, then invitations to tea. But I need you to understand something important. He leaned forward, his gaze steady. Your kindness didn't just feed me for a moment, Nia. It interrupted something much darker. I had stopped caring whether I lived or died. Your sandwich was the first time in weeks I felt like someone might notice if I disappeared. Danielle's hand went to her mouth. Nia felt a chill despite the warm room. I'm telling you this not to burden you, Elliot continued, but because you deserve to know the truth about what your kindness did. Sometimes we think our small actions don't matter. Yours saved my life." The room fell silent again, heavier this time. Nia tried to process what he was saying, that her simple act, done without thought of reward, had somehow pulled this man back from an edge she hadn't even known was there. After a moment, Elliot stood up. "Before you leave, there's one more place I'd like Nia to see. It's just a short walk from here, if that's all right with you, Mrs. Brooks." Danielle hesitated, looking at Nia. "It's completely safe," Elliot assured her. "Commander Hale will accompany us, of course. But I believe Nia should see what her kindness may have awakened." Nia met her mother's questioning gaze and nodded slightly. She wanted to understand what this was all about. Danielle sighed. "All right, but Isaiah and I are coming too." "Of course," Elliot agreed, relief visible on his face. "It's just down the path toward the water. We can walk there in 5 minutes." As they prepared to leave the guest house, Nia noticed how Elliot moved, carefully, like someone relearning how to exist in the world. Whatever he wanted to show her, she sensed it was important not just to her, but to him. Something about her simple act of kindness had shifted something fundamental for this man, and she was only beginning to understand the ripples it had created. "It's not far," Elliot said, as Commander Hale helped everyone into a modest navy blue sedan. Nia settled into the back seat between her mother and Isaiah, her mind spinning with questions. The drive lasted barely 5 minutes through familiar streets, but Nia's heartbeat quickened as they turned onto her daily route to school. "Wait, aren't we—" She pressed her face closer to the window as the car slowed. Commander Hale pulled to the curb directly across from the boarded-up clinic building, the same one Nia walked past every day, the same one she secretly imagined working in someday. "Why are we stopping here?" Danielle asked, her voice tight with confusion. Elliot turned in the passenger seat to face them. "This is what I wanted to show you." They climbed out of the car, standing on the sidewalk before the 2-story brick building with its plywood-covered windows and faded sign. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across its tired facade. "I don't understand," Danielle said, keeping one hand firmly on Isaiah's shoulder. Elliot pulled a ring of keys from his pocket. "This building belonged to my father's estate. Now it belongs to me." Nia stared at him, the connection suddenly clicking into place. "Your family owns this?" "Yes." Elliot fingered the keys nervously. "My father purchased several properties in this neighborhood years ago as investments. This clinic operated for nearly 20 years before closing 5 years ago when funding dried up." Commander Hale stood a respectful distance away, his posture alert but relaxed enough to suggest no threat existed here. "Since my father died," Elliot continued, "I've been unable to decide what to do with his properties. Sell them? Leave them empty? Donate them?" He gestured toward the building. "This one in particular has been difficult." "Why?" Nia asked. "Because it once mattered," Elliot replied simply. "It once helped people." He moved toward the front entrance, unlocking a heavy padlock on the chain that secured the door. "Would you like to see inside?" Danielle hesitated, but Nia stepped forward eagerly. "Yes, please." With a firm tug, Elliot pulled open the door. A rush of stale air greeted them as they stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight streaming through cracks in the plywood coverings. "Watch your step," Commander Hale cautioned, following behind them. The reception area was empty, except for a battered desk and a few broken chairs. Faded outlines on the walls showed where posters and signs once hung. Isaiah clung to Danielle's hand, unusually quiet as they moved deeper into the building. It was a community health center, Elliot explained, leading them down a hallway where doors opened to small exam rooms. Basic care, vaccinations, prenatal services, nutrition counseling. Nia walked slowly, taking in every detail. Despite the peeling paint and cobwebs, she could see what this place had once been, and what it could be again. In her mind, She transformed the empty spaces. Fresh paint on the walls, proper exam tables instead of dust outlines, cabinets stocked with supplies, a play area for children in the waiting room. "I always wondered what it looked like inside," she said softly. Elliot watched her face closely. "You've thought about this building before?" Nia nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "I pass it every day going to school. Sometimes I imagine—" "Imagine what?" Elliot prompted gently when she trailed off. "What it would be like to work in a place like this someday," Nia admitted. "To help people who can't afford regular doctors. People like us." Something shifted in Elliot's expression. A softening. A certainty replacing doubt. "How long have you wanted that?" he asked. "Since I was little," Nia said. "My grandmother got sick when I was 8. We couldn't afford care until it was too late." She touched the peeling wallpaper. "Places like this matter." Danielle watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Nia's always wanted to work in healthcare. "But college is expensive. And—" She stopped herself. "And families like yours rarely get the chances you deserve," Elliot finished quietly. They continued through the building, past a small kitchen area, storage rooms, and upstairs to offices, and a community room with a collapsed table. Throughout, Nia kept seeing possibilities where others might see only decay. When they returned to the main reception area, Elliot turned to face them fully, his expression solemn but animated in a way it hadn't been before. "I've spent months trying to decide what to do with this building," he said. "Sell it to developers? Let it continue rotting? Neither felt right, but I couldn't see another option." He looked directly at Nia. "Until yesterday." "What changed yesterday?" Nia asked, though something inside her already knew the answer. "I met someone who sees people instead of problems," Elliot said simply. "Someone who gives even when she has almost nothing." He took a deep breath. "I want to reopen this clinic." The statement hung in the dusty air. Isaiah fidgeted, but everyone else remained perfectly still. "Not just reopen it," Elliot continued. "Transform it. Make it what this neighborhood needs. Healthcare, yes, but also nutrition support, counseling, job assistance, after-school programs." His voice grew stronger with each word. "And I want your family to be part of making that happen." Danielle's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you saying?" "I want to fund 3 things," Elliot said, his gaze steady. "First, the complete renovation and reopening of this clinic. Second, financial stability for your family. Enough to eliminate the constant worry about next month's rent or tomorrow's dinner. And third," he turned to Nia, "your education, all the way through college and beyond, if that's what you want." Nia felt like all the air had been sucked from her lungs. Her mother gripped her shoulder. "Why?" Danielle's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Commander Hale spoke up for the first time since entering the building. "Mrs. Brooks, I've known the Grayson family for 30 years. They don't make promises lightly." "It's not charity," Elliot added quickly. "It's investment. In Nia's potential, in this neighborhood, in what might be possible when someone finally believes this community deserves better." He hesitated. "Your daughter's kindness showed me that goodness still exists without cameras or rewards. That's worth investing in." Danielle shook her head slowly, not in refusal, but in disbelief. "It's too much. Too big." "Mom," Nia whispered, her mind racing with possibilities she'd never dared consider before. "We should discuss this at home," Danielle said firmly. "This isn't a decision to make standing in a dusty building." Elliot nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He handed her a business card. "My number and Commander Hale's are both here. Call us when you're ready to talk more." As they prepared to leave, Nia took one last look around the empty clinic. For the first time, the dream she'd kept tucked away seemed almost within reach. Not just helping her family survive, but maybe helping her whole neighborhood heal. The drive back to their home was silent, everyone lost in their own thoughts. Commander Hale dropped them off with a respectful nod and a promise to check in tomorrow. That evening, the Brooks family gathered around their worn kitchen table, the familiar setting now feeling strange after the day's extraordinary events. The business card Elliot had given them sat in the middle of the table like a foreign object. "Do you think it's real?" Isaiah finally asked, breaking the silence. "Are we going to be rich now?" "Hush," Danielle said automatically, though without her usual sharpness. "It sounds too good to be true," Nia admitted quietly. "But he seemed sincere." Danielle traced a crack in the tabletop with her finger. "I've learned that when something seems too good to be true, it usually is." "But what if it's not?" Nia asked. "What if this is real?" The question hung between them. Through the thin curtains, Nia could see Ruthie Bell watering her front plants, unaware that her neighbor's world might have just shifted on its axis. "Even if he means what he says now," Danielle said carefully, "people change their minds. Rich people get bored with charity projects." "He didn't talk about it like charity," Nia countered. "He talked about it like he needed this as much as we do." Isaiah looked between them, unusually serious. "But we could have food every day, right? And Mom wouldn't have to work 2 jobs?" Danielle's eyes glistened at her son's simple understanding of what wealth might mean. "It's not that simple, baby." "Why not?" Isaiah persisted. Nia watched her mother struggle for an answer. The promise Elliot had made was so enormous, it seemed impossible to grasp. Education, security, a future beyond mere survival. How could they possibly trust that such a miracle could be real? "I don't know," Danielle finally whispered. "I just don't know." Danielle stared at the business card on the table, turning it over and over between her fingers. Isaiah had gone to his room to play with his action figures, leaving Nia and her mother alone with their thoughts. "People will talk," Danielle finally said, her voice low. "Everyone on this block will be in our business. Reporters might come. You know how folks get when they smell money." Nia nodded. "I know." A soft knock at the back door interrupted them. Ruthie Bell's familiar silhouette appeared through the thin curtain, a covered dish in her hands. "I saw your faces when you got back," Ruthie announced as Danielle let her in. "Figured you might need some talking food." The smell of fresh cornbread filled the small kitchen as Ruthie set down the dish and made herself comfortable at the table without waiting for an invitation. "So," she said, eyeing the business card in Danielle's hand, "that was quite a parade this morning. Half the neighborhood still talking about those Navy men at your door." Danielle sighed heavily. "Miss Ruthie, we don't know what to do." As Nia cut the cornbread, she explained everything: the clinic, Elliot's offer, the money, the education promise. Ruthie listened without interruption, her weathered hands folded on the table. "Sounds like a miracle," Ruthie finally said when Nia finished. "So why do you both look like somebody died?" "Because miracles don't happen to people like us," Danielle replied. "Not without strings." Ruthie took a bite of cornbread. "You're right to be careful. But let me ask you something, Nia. When you gave that man your sandwich, did you know he had money?" "No, ma'am." "Did you know he had important friends?" "No." "Did you think you'd get anything back?" Nia shook her head. "I just thought he needed it more than we did." Ruthie nodded firmly. "Then the gift is clean at its root. You didn't help him to get something. He's not helping you because he owes you. You're both just doing what decent folks do, seeing need and meeting it." Danielle broke her piece of cornbread into tiny crumbs. "But it's so much money, Miss Ruthie. People will think we're taking advantage." "People always talk," Ruthie said dismissively. "They talked when your husband left. They talked when you took that second job. Let them talk." "What do you want from this, Nia?" Danielle asked, turning to her daughter. "Really?" Nia considered the question carefully. "I don't care about being rich or famous," she said slowly. "But if the clinic could reopen, if kids like Isaiah could see a doctor when they need to, if maybe I could learn enough to work there someday." Her voice grew stronger. "That's what matters to me." Ruthie reached across the table and covered Nia's hand with her own. "That's worth saying yes to." They talked late into the evening, weighing fears against hopes. Ruthie reminded them that good fortune wasn't always a trap, that sometimes the universe simply recognized goodness. By the time she left, taking Isaiah's empty cornbread plate from his room, something had shifted in Danielle's face. Not quite acceptance, but the first opening toward possibility. The night passed slowly, with both Nia and Danielle sleeping in fits and starts. Dreams of white coats and gleaming clinic halls mixed with nightmares of public ridicule and vanishing promises. Morning arrived with weak sunlight and the sound of a car pulling up outside. Commander Hale stood at their door again, this time accompanied by a woman in a crisp suit carrying a leather portfolio. "This is Ms. Jensen," Commander Hale explained. "Mr. Grayson's attorney. She's brought some preliminary documents for your review." Danielle invited them in with wary politeness. At the kitchen table, becoming the center of these life-changing conversations, Ms. Jensen laid out several folders. "We've structured this simply," she explained, her voice matter-of-fact but kind. "This first agreement provides immediate support. Home repairs, utilities, basic necessities. The second establishes an educational trust for Nia, accessible for college and professional training. The third outlines preliminary plans for the clinic renovation, including a position for Nia in its development if she wishes." Commander Hale added, "Every document has been written to give your family protection and control. You can walk away at any point." "No public appearances required?" Danielle asked sharply. "None," Ms. Jensen confirmed. "Mr. Grayson is actually quite private himself." Nia studied the papers, surprised by their straightforward language. There were no complicated conditions, no demands for family control. Just support, opportunity, and respect. After nearly an hour of questions and explanations, Danielle picked up the pen Ms. Jensen offered. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed the first document, then steadied. "I'm doing this for my children," she said quietly. "For their future." Commander Hale nodded. "Mr. Grayson will be pleased." By early afternoon, as Ms. Jensen's car pulled away, Nia noticed a small crowd gathering at the end of their block. 2 people with cameras, neighbors whispering. A van with a local news logo parked across the street. "It's starting already," Danielle murmured, watching from behind the curtain. "The story's getting out." Nia stood beside her mother, watching as more people arrived. Their curious faces turned toward the small house where a sandwich had somehow changed everything. "What do we do now?" she whispered. Nia walked slowly down her street, textbooks clutched against her chest. The scene ahead made her steps falter. 3 news vans were parked along the curb. A small cluster of reporters stood on the sidewalk near her house. Neighbors she barely spoke to were gathered in excited groups, pointing toward her home. "There she is!" someone called out. Cameras swiveled in her direction. Nia froze, unprepared for the sudden attention. "Nia!" A familiar voice cut through the noise. Principal Price was striding toward her, tall and purposeful in her navy blazer. She reached Nia's side and placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "Let's get you home," Principal Price said firmly, guiding her through the crowd. The reporters called out questions that blurred together in Nia's ears. "Is it true you saved a millionaire's life? Did you know who he was when you gave him food? How does it feel to be rewarded for your kindness?" Commander Hale stepped from the porch, his presence instantly commanding respect. He moved toward them, creating a path through the onlookers. "School officials and family only," he announced in a voice that didn't need to be raised to be heard. The crowd reluctantly parted. Once inside, Nia found her mother sitting stiffly on the couch, with a young woman holding a small recorder. Danielle's face showed the careful politeness she used with bill collectors. "Just a few more questions, Mrs. Brooks," the reporter was saying. "Our readers would love to know how this changes things for your family." In the kitchen, Elliot sat at the table with architectural drawings spread out before him. He looked up when Principal Price entered with Nia. "Perfect timing," he said, standing to greet them. "Principal Price has been sharing valuable insights about student needs." Principal Price turned to Nia, her eyes serious. "I'm proud of you, Nia. Extremely proud. But I want you to remember something important. Public stories turn people into symbols faster than they tell the truth. Stay grounded in who you actually are." Isaiah bounced around the kitchen, unable to contain his excitement. "They put our house on TV, and they said Nia's a hero." Ruthie Bell appeared from the back porch, carrying a pitcher of sweet tea. "Fame's a blessing with sharp edges," she commented, pouring glasses for everyone. "Cuts both ways." Elliot gestured for Nia to join him at the table. "Principal Price has been helping me understand how the clinic could serve students," he explained, pointing to different areas on the drawings. "Food storage here, counseling rooms, basic medical care, after-school programs." Nia leaned over the plans, something expanding in her chest. This wasn't just about her family escaping bills and hunger anymore. These rooms could help kids who came to school hungry, teenagers who needed someone to talk to, parents working too many jobs to make doctor appointments. "What do you think?" Elliot asked quietly. "It could change everything," Nia whispered, tracing the outline of a waiting room. Danielle finally escaped the reporter and joined them, her shoulders tight with tension despite her polite smile. She studied the drawings without comment. As evening fell, the crowds outside thinned. Commander Hale departed with a respectful nod. Principal Price hugged Nia before leaving, whispering, "Remember who you are." After dinner, a messenger delivered a large envelope. Inside were detailed architectural sketches and a handwritten note from Elliot. "These are just ideas. Tell me what real families in your neighborhood actually need. This should be built with your wisdom, not just my resources." Later, lying in bed, Nia spread the sketches across her blanket. She traced the lines of future exam rooms, community spaces, and counseling offices with her fingertips. For the first time since the seals had appeared at their door, she let herself fully believe. This was real. Life was actually changing. Morning sunlight streamed through the cracked window in Nia's room, catching dust motes that danced in the golden light. She woke to unfamiliar sounds, men's voices, the clunk of toolboxes, the measured tap of a hammer. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Danielle poked her head into the bedroom. "Get up, sleepyhead. The repair crew is here. They're checking the roof and that broken kitchen pipe." Nia jumped out of bed, surprised to find her mother almost smiling. Isaiah was already in the hallway, following a plumber like an eager shadow. "Can I hold that wrench?" he asked the man, who chuckled and let him carry the smaller tools. Nia dressed quickly, her movements lighter than they had been in years. Her phone pinged with an email notification from Principal Price. "Good morning, Nia. I've spoken with the school board about supporting the clinic initiative. They're very interested in how it could help our students. Perhaps you could present some ideas next month? So proud of you." Principal Price. Danielle actually hummed as she made breakfast. Real eggs, not watered-down oatmeal. The refrigerator had food in it. The electricity bill was paid. The repair crew promised to fix the leaky bathroom ceiling by the end of the week. "Don't be late for school," Danielle called, as Nia grabbed her backpack. The walk to school felt different. Neighbors waved. A mail carrier called her by name. For once, Nia wasn't carrying the weight of adult worries on her 14-year-old shoulders. But by lunchtime, everything changed. "Nia, you need to see this." Tasha, a girl from her math class, thrust a phone in Nia's face. On the screen was a video, grainy security footage from inside the corner store. It showed Nia buying the sandwich, then walking out. The next clip jumped to show her handing it to Elliot. "Read the comments," Tasha said, her voice hushed. The comments scrolled by quickly. "Totally staged." She knew who he was. "Looking for handouts." "Scamming a veteran." Nia's stomach turned to ice. "That's not what happened. They cut out everything between. He was sitting there for at least 10 minutes before I came out." "People are saying you guys planned it all," Tasha continued. "And this developer guy is all over TV talking about it." During afternoon classes, Nia couldn't focus. Her phone kept buzzing with texts from Ruthie and Isaiah. By final bell, she felt sick with worry. She practically ran home, only to find Danielle pacing the living room while the repair crew packed up their tools outside. "Did you see what they're saying?" Danielle demanded, her eyes wild with anger and fear. "This Devin Mercer person is on every channel saying the clinic needs professional management instead of being handed to emotional publicity cases. And now Elliot's lawyer called. Some relative is claiming Elliot isn't mentally stable enough to make decisions about his father's estate." Nia sank onto the couch. "But none of it's true. I never even knew who Elliot was." "Truth doesn't matter in a storm like this," Danielle said, her voice cracking. "These people will destroy us, Nia. They'll make us look like con artists in front of the whole city." Isaiah appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with confusion. "Are the men not fixing our house anymore?" Danielle pulled him close. "I don't know, baby." The phone rang. Danielle answered, listened briefly, then hung up. Her shoulders slumped. "That was Elliot's lawyer. Tomorrow's meeting is canceled. All the paperwork is on hold because of the legal challenge. The money's frozen." Nia stared at the architectural drawings still on the table. Just that morning, they had seemed like blueprints for the future. Now they looked like cruel reminders of a dream that was slipping away. For the first time since she had given away that sandwich, hope felt like a burden too heavy to carry. Morning light filtered weakly through the closed curtains of the Brooks home. Nia sat at the kitchen table, still in her pajamas, staring at a bowl of cereal she couldn't bring herself to eat. Every few minutes, a knock would come at the door, followed by a reporter's voice calling out questions. "Don't answer it," Danielle said, peeking through a tiny gap in the curtains. "They're like vultures out there." The phone rang for the 5th time that morning. Danielle let it go to voicemail. "Maybe I should just go to school," Nia said quietly. "Hiding makes us look guilty." "Not today," Danielle's voice was firm. "Not until we figure this out." Isaiah sat on the living room floor with a coloring book, unusually subdued. The repair crew that had brought so much hope yesterday was nowhere to be seen. Near noon, a familiar knock pattern sounded. 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones. Ruthie's signal. Danielle opened the door just enough to let their elderly neighbor slip inside. "You can't hide forever," Ruthie said, setting down a casserole dish. "People are talking." "Let them talk," Danielle snapped. Ruthie sighed. "That lawyer called me, wanting to know more about Nia, and that developer fellow Mercer was on the morning news." "What did he say?" Nia asked. "Claims he wants to buy the clinic property, for the good of the neighborhood. Says he'd create something properly managed, instead of letting it become a vanity project." Ruthie's tone made it clear what she thought of that idea. Another knock came at the door, this one more insistent. "If it's another reporter," Danielle began. "It's Principal Price," called a voice from outside. "I've brought Nia's schoolwork." Danielle reluctantly opened the door. Principal Price stepped inside, carrying a folder and wearing a worried expression. "How are you holding up?" she asked, handing the folder to Nia. "We've been better," Danielle replied coldly. Principal Price glanced at Isaiah, then lowered her voice. There's something else you should know. The school district received media requests for Nia's disciplinary record. Nia's stomach dropped. What? Someone found a note from last semester about you shoving another student in the hallway. Danielle turned to Nia in disbelief. You never told me about this. It wasn't like that, Nia protested. Jeremy was making fun of Lisa because her clothes smelled like mildew. He kept blocking her way, calling her trash girl. I just pushed past him so she could get away. The report doesn't show that context, Principal Price explained. Just that there was an incident. I came to warn you, it's likely to come out soon. Danielle sank into a chair, her face in her hands. This is getting worse by the hour. Maybe we should just walk away from all of it. The clinic, the money, everything. Let these rich people fight it out among themselves. Nia felt a heaviness settle in her chest. Not shame for feeding Elliot, she'd never regret that, but guilt that her family was suffering because of her actions. Your mother might be right, Principal Price said gently. Sometimes, stepping back is the wisest choice. But Ruthie Bell shook her head firmly. Lies spread fastest when decent people go silent. That's how the powerful always win. As evening approached, the reporters finally left. The house grew quiet, except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Danielle put Isaiah to bed early, her movements weary. Alone in the dimness of her room, Nia opened her school notebook. The folded note from that first night slipped out. Honor still lives here. She traced the words with her finger, remembering the man who had nothing but still found a way to say thank you. She thought about the disciplinary note, the edited video, and all the voices trying to twist her story. With sudden clarity, Nia realized what she needed to do. The truth, her whole truth, needed to be told by her own voice, not filtered through others who didn't understand her life or her choices. The kitchen light cast long shadows across the worn table as Ruthie Bell sat beside Nia, her weathered hands folded calmly. Danielle stood at the sink, mechanically washing dishes that didn't need cleaning, her shoulders tight with worry. Tell me about this shoving business, Ruthie said softly. The whole story, not just what's in that report. Nia took a deep breath. It happened last November. There's this boy, Jeremy Wilkins. His dad owns that car dealership on Main. He's big, always wearing expensive sneakers. She traced a pattern on the tablecloth. And there was this other kid, Marcus. His family's been staying at the shelter since their apartment flooded. Danielle turned from the sink, a dripping plate in her hand. Marcus would come to school in the same clothes for days, Nia continued. Sometimes they smelled like mildew. One morning, Jeremy cornered him by the lockers, pinching his nose and calling him trash boy, asking real loud if his family bathed in dumpster juice. Ruthie shook her head. Lord have mercy. Marcus was crying, trying to get away, but Jeremy kept stepping in front of him. So Nia's voice grew small. I shoved Jeremy hard enough that he stumbled, and I pulled Marcus past him. And then what? Ruthie prompted. Jeremy told a teacher I attacked him for no reason. I got detention, but I never explained why. If I had, Marcus would have had to tell his story to the principal, in front of everyone. Nia looked up at her mother. He was already so embarrassed. I didn't want to make it worse. Danielle set the plate down carefully. You never told me. It was just detention. You were working double shifts that week. It didn't seem important. Ruthie turned to Danielle, her eyes bright with understanding. Don't you see? This isn't some mark against her character. It's proof of the same heart that fed a stranger when she was hungry herself. She protects dignity, even when it costs her. Danielle wiped her hands slowly on a dish towel. But will anyone believe that now? The phone rang, and Danielle answered. After a brief conversation, she handed it to Nia. It's Principal Price. Nia listened as her principal explained that she'd found Marcus's counselor notes from that day, which mentioned the bullying incident. "I can testify to what really happened," Principal Price assured her. "And there's going to be a public hearing about the clinic property next week. The community gets to speak before any decisions are made." When Nia hung up, she felt something crystallize within her. "I can't win by pretending to be perfect," she said quietly. "Nobody is. But I can tell the truth about who I am. Just a hungry girl who still believed someone else needed help more." Ruthie squeezed her hand. "That's all anyone can ask of you." As the evening deepened, another call came. Commander Hale's deep voice sounded concerned as Danielle put him on speakerphone. "Elliot's lawyers have advised him to maintain complete silence until the hearing," he explained. "The relative challenging his competence is using every word he speaks as evidence of instability. I'm afraid you may have to face this without knowing if he'll be there to support you." After the call ended, Danielle looked at her daughter with worried eyes. "Are you sure you want to do this? Stand up in front of all those people?" Nia nodded, thinking of the note still in her notebook. "Honor still lives here. Not just in her house, but in her heart. I have to," she said simply. "Otherwise, they win by making me afraid of my own truth." The next day arrived with a sky the color of dishwater. Nia stood outside the municipal building, gripping the straps of her backpack so tightly her knuckles turned white. The hearing room doors loomed ahead like the entrance to another world. "You ready?" Danielle asked, smoothing Nia's collar one last time. Nia nodded, though her stomach felt like it was filled with stones. Principal Price approached them, professional in a navy blazer, while Commander Hale stood nearby, his posture military straight despite his civilian clothes. Ruthie Bell completed their small group, her Sunday dress pressed for the occasion. "Remember," Ruthie whispered, "just speak your truth, plain." Inside, the room buzzed with voices. Every seat was filled, and people lined the walls. Nia spotted neighbors, teachers, and strangers drawn by the story that had spread like wildfire. At the front table sat Devin Mercer in an expensive suit, his smile practiced and confident. Beside him was a thin, stern-looking man introduced as Elliot's cousin, Richard Grayson. The hearing began with formal introductions. The head of the zoning board explained they were gathered to determine the future of the clinic property and whether Elliot Grayson's proposed donation could proceed. Devin Mercer spoke first, standing with easy authority. "This neighborhood needs structured investment, not emotional gestures," he said, gesturing to charts showing his development plans. "While the story of a sandwich is touching, we need sustainable solutions from experienced professionals, not impulsive charity driven by a viral moment." His words were smooth, reasonable-sounding, and they made Nia's kindness seem small and foolish. Richard Grayson followed, his voice tight with what sounded like concern. "My cousin has suffered tremendous loss. His grief has made him vulnerable to manipulation." He glanced pointedly at the Brooks family. "These sudden, grandiose gestures are not in character for the careful businessman I've known for decades. He needs protection, not encouragement to give away family assets based on sentiment." When Nia's turn came, the room went quiet. She walked to the microphone, her legs trembling beneath her. The faces before her blurred. "I'm not perfect," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I get hungry. I get mad sometimes. I've messed up at school." She took a breath. "When I gave Mr. Grayson that sandwich, I didn't know who he was. I just knew he looked like he needed food, more than I did right then." Her voice grew stronger. "And yes, I once shoved a boy at school. He was mocking another kid for being poor, for smelling bad because his family was living in a shelter. I didn't tell anyone why because I didn't want to embarrass that kid more." The room stayed silent as she continued. People keep asking if I deserve what might happen after I gave away that sandwich. But that was never the point. The point is, hungry people deserve food before they deserve suspicion. From the corner of her eye, Nia saw Danielle slowly straighten in her seat, chin lifting, eyes bright with something that looked like pride. The board members exchanged glances. Something had shifted in the room. Nia's unpolished honesty stood in stark contrast to the rehearsed presentations that came before. "Thank you, Miss Brooks," said the board chairperson. "If there are no other speakers, we'll move toward deliberation." The double doors at the back of the room swung open with a decisive click. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Elliot Grayson walked in, pale but steady, his eyes finding Nia's across the crowded room. The crowd fell silent as Elliot Grayson walked steadily down the center aisle. His face was thinner than when Nia had last seen him, but his eyes were clear and focused. His lawyer half rose from his seat, alarm flashing across his face. "Mr. Grayson, we discussed waiting until—" Elliot raised a hand, silencing him. Instead of joining his legal team or sitting with his cousin, he moved directly to stand beside Nia at the microphone. "I need to speak," he said simply to the board. "And I need to do it standing next to the person who saved my life." Richard Grayson's face tightened. "My cousin is not well enough to—" "I'm perfectly capable of speaking for myself," Elliot cut in, his voice stronger than his frame suggested. "And I'm here to correct several misrepresentations." He placed both hands on the podium to steady himself. "First, Nia Brooks and her family never asked me for anything. Not money, not opportunity, not even recognition. When she gave me that sandwich, she had no idea who I was, or what I might be able to offer in return." Elliot turned briefly to look at Nia. "What no one in this room except Commander Hale knows is that I had stopped eating for days. I wasn't just hungry. I was surrendering. After losing my wife and daughter, after my father's passing, I had decided that continuing wasn't worth the effort." A hush fell deeper over the room. The sandwich wasn't just food. It was the first genuine human kindness I'd experienced in months that asked nothing in return. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. The note left on the Brooks porch that night. "Honor still lives here." That was from me. I wanted them to know that goodness had been recognized, even before I was ready to reveal myself. Elliot handed a folder to the board chairperson. "Before this challenge was ever filed, I had already signed documents placing the clinic property into an independent nonprofit structure. It cannot legally be seized for private development regardless of today's outcome." Devin Mercer's confident smile faltered. "But there's something else." Elliot's voice grew stronger. "My father left behind more than just the clinic building. He established a community trust for underserved neighborhoods, a substantial fund I've never activated because my grief convinced me no worthy missions existed anymore." He looked at Nia again. "I was wrong." The room remained perfectly still as Elliot continued. "The trust will now fund complete repairs for the Brooks home, a full educational scholarship for Nia through medical school if she chooses that path, and reopen the clinic debt-free with expanded services, meal programs, counseling, youth internships, and health outreach programs designed with neighborhood input." Richard Grayson's face had gone pale. Mercer's plans were collapsing visibly as board members studied the legal documents Elliot had provided. "My father believed in recognizing character when you find it," Elliot said. "I'm finally honoring that belief." The stunned silence lasted only seconds before breaking into murmurs, then scattered applause that grew until it filled the room. Nia stood frozen, barely breathing, until she felt her mother's warm hand find hers and squeeze tight. Danielle's eyes glistened as she looked at her daughter, pride and wonder replacing the caution she had carried for so long. Over the following months, workers restored the clinic building, transforming peeling walls into freshly painted spaces. The Brooks home received long-needed repairs, a new roof, fixed plumbing, and sturdy front steps. Through it all, Nia attended every planning meeting for the clinic while keeping up with schoolwork and helping Isaiah with his homework each evening. On opening day, spring sunshine warmed the freshly painted sign, Brooks Grayson Community Health Center. A red ribbon stretched across the entrance, where just months before, boards had sealed away all possibility. "Can you believe it?" Isaiah whispered, tugging at Nia's sleeve. He wore a clip-on tie that Commander Hale had given him for the occasion. "Almost can't," Nia admitted, smoothing her new dress, the first she'd owned that hadn't belonged to someone else first. Inside, the transformation was even more striking. Clean exam rooms lined one hallway. A counseling office featured comfortable chairs and children's books. The pantry wall stood fully stocked with healthy foods, and a youth volunteer desk waited near the entrance, designed with Principal Price's careful input to include students as helpers rather than just recipients. Ruthie Bell beamed from her seat in the front row, her Sunday hat perched proudly on her head. "Told you blessings sometimes arrive sounding like trouble first," she called to Nia. Commander Hale stood at attention with 5 other veterans who had volunteered labor during the renovation. Their presence lent a quiet dignity to the occasion, a reminder that honor had indeed arrived at Nia's door that fateful morning. Danielle stood near the podium, wearing a new blouse and, more noticeably, an expression Nia rarely saw: hope without reservation. When their eyes met, Danielle nodded firmly, giving permission for joy neither of them had dared believe in before. "Time to cut that ribbon, honey," Danielle said, no longer holding back the tears that slipped down her cheeks. Elliot Grayson stepped forward, looking healthier than Nia had ever seen him. His face had filled out, and though quieter than the other speakers, his voice carried strength it hadn't before. "This room," he said, gesturing to the largest counseling space, "will be named after my daughter, Sarah. And this nutrition center," he turned to Nia, "will bear the name of Nia's grandmother, who taught her family to feed others before counting portions." Nia stepped up to the ribbon, large scissors in hand. The crowd applauded as she made the cut, officially opening a place that had lived only in her imagination for so long. Later, after speeches ended and most guests had gone home, Nia noticed a small boy lingering near the food shelf. He kept his eyes down, shoulders hunched, pretending to be interested in a pamphlet while stealing glances at the sandwiches. She recognized that look. She'd worn it herself many times. Nia approached him slowly. "Those are really good," she said, nodding toward the food. "Would you like one?" The boy hesitated, then nodded slightly. She wrapped a sandwich in a napkin and placed it in his hands. "You don't have to wait until it gets worse, you know," she said gently. "That's why we're here now." He looked up, surprise replacing wariness in his eyes. Nia smiled as the clinic lights glowed warmly behind her. The circle was complete, from her last sandwich given away to this first one, offered freely in a place built from that very same kindness. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.